وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq for continuing our study of Insan Kamil or Perfect Man by Ayatollah Mutahhari Rahmatullah alayh. Ayatollah Mutahhari says that there was an idea in India and ancient Greece that human beings before this life, they were created. Their soul, their spirit was created before body. And then when the body is ready, the soul or spirit is put into body or connected with the body. And he says, if this is the case, then we can expect to say that, okay, we have to be unhappy with this body and with this physical world, and we should consider it only as a cage, only as a prison, only as something negative that we have to get rid of. He says the Quran doesn't support this idea. And although some Muslim thinkers had this idea that the spirit is created before body, but he says, Mullah Sadra says that he was actually inspired by the Quran to come up with the idea of ruh or a spirit being jismaniyatul huduth, rawhaniyatul baqa. Ruh, from the beginning, starts with development in embryo, in the body. And when body reaches certain stage, then the soul is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mullah Sadra is inspired by Ayah 14 of Surah Mu'minun. And of course, then he has his own idea of harakat al-jawhari, substantial motion, and philosophically he argues for this. But many times philosophers, scientists need inspiration. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Mu'minun number 14 refers to different stages of embryo. There is alaqa, there is mudgha, and then bones and meat or flesh. Then Allah says, ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. Then we gave it another creation. Up to here was similar, different stages, but of the same type of creation. But then, after certain stage of development, for example, after 120 days, then there is another creation that Allah gives, another making. And this is a spirit. I have a paper about development and creation of human soul. I can find it on internet, inshallah, if you are interested in philosophical ideas about this. Based on such understanding, we are not from another world and then imprisoned in this world. We start in this world and we have to rise and go beyond. But we start here. Of course, there is an element in human spirit as soon as it is created, which is godly. Because Allah says, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ. You can say that we belong to another world, but not in the sense that we literally came from there. No, we didn't come from there, although Allah has put in us all the things that we need, all the potential that are needed in order to reach that level. So it's not that we used to be like angels or better than angels before our birth, and then we had to come down, and then we have to free ourselves. So we would develop then a very negative impression about this world, this physical life. No, we start here, but we have been given great elements in our creation, like fitra, like freedom, like great capacity for knowledge, for love, for mercy, for virtues, and then we can become the best of creatures. As we have explained, in self-knowledge about this ayah, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored children of Adam. We have given them sustenance from tayyibat. We have made them able to transport their goods, to travel. فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. The land or seas. What? وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. We have raised them over many of our creatures. At the time of birth, we are not best. We are better than many. We are better than animals. We are better than insects and birds and non-living beings. Not better than angels at the time of birth. We have to become better, but it's not that we are automatically put in that condition. So, Ayatollah Mutahari says, our example and this world is like a child and a mother. A child needs the mother, should be grateful to the mother. But the child should not always remain dependent on the mother. Should not remain always as a child for the mother, in the sense that mother has to feed you, mother has to take care of you, and you are only thinking like an infant, for example. If you remain at the level of this mother world, then you will be only like an animal. We have to go higher. Ayatollah Mutahari says, when the Quran says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Asfala safilin, going to the lowest of the low, means that you remain as an infant or a child of this mother nature, just at this level. You don't grow, you don't become a person who can make decisions, who can run his life. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ are those people who rise, who don't remain at that basic level. If you remain always on the lap of your mother like an infant, you don't go to school, you don't go to work, you don't learn, you don't do anything, you don't go to the street to learn social skills, for example, don't make friends. You always remain on the lap of your mother. and just mother, puts food in your mouth, then you are not going to grow. So he says we have to be careful about these expressions. So when we say we are a bird that we are put in the cage in this world, or we have come from another world and we are not comfortable here, they can be interpreted in a nice way, in the way which is compatible with the Quran, and they can be interpreted in the way which suits more that worldview of ancient Greece and India, that we were created before. And sometimes, even they say, we lived actually in other bodies before, they have this idea of, reincarnation. Ayatollah Mutahari says, of course, Urafan and mystics have not always been thinking like that. This is maybe you find it more in some kind of Sufi literature or some maybe mystical literature, but great Urafan, they have great attention to all aspects. For example, he refers to Shabistari. Shabistari has a very important book of poem called Gulshan Raz. And Ayatollah Mutahari says that how this book happened and came to existence is very interesting. Some people were sent to him. Some people sent to him questions. Shabistar is in northwestern Iran. Is like Tabriz and province of eastern Azerbaijan in Iran. So maybe he was there, maybe he was somewhere, but anyway, he had received some questions from people in Khurasan, which is northeastern Iran. And in one session, he gave answer to these questions. Later, he expanded, but the origin of the book is the answers he gave in one session to those questions. And it became one of the masterpieces of Irfan, Gulshan Raz. So he says, for example, Shabistari says, به نام آن که جان را فکرت آموخت چراغ دل به نور جان برافروخت ز فضلش هر دو عالم گشت روشن ز فیضش خاک آدم گشت گلشن. So he says, in the name of the one who gave life, or meaning soul. John can sometimes mean life, human life especially, but for other things also. And sometimes it refers to our soul, which is responsible for our life. So in the name of the one who taught our soul how to think, the ability to think and develop thoughts and ideas is given by Allah as a gift to us. The one who ignited the lantern of the heart with the light of the life or soul. Very beautiful. Because of his favor, both worlds are bright and shining. Because of his grace, the soul from which Adam was made has become a garden. So Ayatollah Mutahari says, here he makes good reference to the value of external world and ayat afaqi, as we called it before, because we have two types of ayat. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِم. Soon we will show them our signs in the horizon, in the external world, and in themselves. But you see, Shabistari has also very good attention to the internal world. So they have not missed one part. But some, yes, but not all. They have great attention to both. For example, he says, به نزد آن که جانش در تجلی است همه عالم کتاب حق تعالی است. According to someone whose soul has reached a level of manifestation, all the world is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have Kitab al-Takween and Kitab al-Tashri'. We can understand about Allah and His attributes and His qualities and actions by reading the Quran, the scriptures, and we can understand if we are prepared by reflecting on the book of Takween, generation. Not in the same level, not with the same clarity, but Allah has manifested Himself also in the book of creation. Or he refers to Jami, and he says how Jami is also paying attention. Mullah Abdul Rahman al-Jami has paid attention to both sides. For example, Jahan mir'at husn shahid mas. فَشَاهِدْ وَجْهَهُ فِي كُلِّ مِرْآتِ. He says this world is a mirror that reflects the beauty of Allah who is present. Try to witness the face of God in every mirror. أَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. So it's not that all of them neglected the value of dunya, but just some. So he says, inshallah, when we later explain the Islamic understanding about perfect man, you would see how we try to put everything in its due place and give right of everything and do justice with everything. Then he starts with a discussion that he expands in the next session. And that is about the issue of khud. Khud means self. In mystical and mostly Sufi literature, there is great emphasis on distancing yourself from your khud. Let us, for the time being, just say khud, because if I say self, nafs ammara, etc., it may be confusing. So we say khud and we explain what we mean. So they say we have to distance ourselves from our khud. We have to fight our khud. We have to even kill our khud. We have to let others, for example, humiliate our khud so that we don't worship and pay too much attention to our khud. So you find many things like this. This has some truth, but it should not become the only way of looking at human khud. What we find in Islam is that Islam introduces to us two types of khud, two types of, for the time being, let's say self, or two dimensions, two aspects of khud. One is a friend, another is an enemy. If you think the friend doesn't exist, it's a problem. If you think that enemy doesn't exist, also it's a problem. And if you think they are both there and you want to attack the enemy to save the friend, you have to be very careful, because there is a chance that maybe you do the opposite. Ayatollah Mutahari says, suppose there is a child who has gone on top of a tree, and then you see that there is a snake. This snake may bite the child. So you need to save the child. But if someone wants to, for example, shoot at the snake, has to be very careful, because the snake has gone very close to the child. Maybe instead of the snake, then you would injure or kill the child. Or maybe, for example, a killer, a murderer is, fighting with someone who is innocent, or with one of our friends that we have to save, and they are, fighting one by one. So you have to be very careful which one you want to save, which one you want to get rid of. He says it is a miracle of Islam. Miracle of Islam is not only one. He says معجزه اسلام این است که این دو خود را آنچنان دقیق تشخیص داده است که هیچ اشتباه نمی شود. Islam has so accurately distinguished between these two kinds of khud, or self, although we will talk about it, that they are never mixed up. Islam has so well distinguished between them, so accurately and carefully. Of course, people who are equipped with proper methodology, they can reach this. Otherwise, they may have difficulty in understanding the overall view of Islam. So this session ends. Then he starts the next session, which is again called نقد و بررسی مکتب عرفان, which is evaluation of the school of Irfan when it comes to Insan Kamil. He starts with this phrase, this section from Surah Nazi'at, from verses 37 to 41. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to two types of life, two types of choices that human beings make. Some people choose dunya over the hereafter, and they go out of the limits and borders and become inordinate. Some people are the opposite. خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. They fear the position of the Lord. They have respect and khashya towards the Lord. وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. They prohibit the soul from going after her whims and her lower desires. These people are able to settle in heaven. This nahan nafs anil hawa is very important. There can be no spirituality without this, without controlling our nafs, self-control. In the book Self-Development, I have mentioned that the spirituality starts with, after self-knowledge, self-awareness, etc., with self-control and then self-purification. But if you do whatever you like, then you cannot reach any high position. So he starts this lesson or session with these verses from the Holy Quran, Surah Nazi'at. And he says one of the important issues in studying Insan Kamil according to the school of Irfan is to study the relation between Insan and his own self, his own nafs, his own khud. He says this is discussed in Islam. This is discussed by mystics and Sufis. Of course, they are inspired by Islam and by the Quran. It's not that they have independent source, but the thing is that they have also tried to develop, their own understanding based on their thinking, based on their experiences, etc. Maybe they have understood everything properly. Maybe they have missed certain things. Maybe they have overemphasized, but they are also inspired by the Quran. He says, we have tazkiyatun nafs. One of the tasks of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was tazkiyatun nafs. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. So يزكيهم. One of the tasks of the Prophet was to purify people, in the sense that helping them in the process of self-purification, being their guide, being their role model, being their coach, traveling with them so that they can be pure. And the Quran says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Only those who purify their nafs, they can reach salvation and happiness. So this nafs that we have to purify, when it is not purified, acts like an enemy, and indeed a great enemy, or even greatest enemy. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "A'da aduvik nafsuka allati bayna janbayk." Your greatest enemy is your own nafs, which is inside. Inside, not in the physical sense, of course, just for the sake of simplicity, we say inside. So your own nafs, if it is not purified, if it is not tamed and trained and educated, is your greatest enemy. Sa'di, great poet, he says, تو با دشمن نفس همخانه ای چه در بند پیکار بیگانه ای. He says, you and nafs, which is your enemy, are in the same house. You live in the same place. You are like roommates. Why are you thinking of fighting strangers? Be gone. Your enemy is inside your home. Saadi says, one Arif was asked, what do you understand? How do you interpret this hadith that Rasulullah said, أَعْدَى عَدُوِّكَ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَكَ? Your greatest enemy is your own nafs. And that Arif answered in this way. He said, every enemy, if you are kind to him, and whatever they want, you give them, sooner or later they become your friend. If you serve them and listen to them and give them whatever they want, sooner or later they become your friends. Of course, there can be exceptions, but he said it in a general way. But your nafs is such an enemy that when you listen to your nafs and give what your nafs wants, the enmity increases, the demands increase, and your nafs would harm you more. So this is one aspect of nafs being your greatest enemy. Of course, there are also other aspects that in some discussions about self-development, we have explained that, for example, your nafs is an enemy that is aware of all your weak points, weaknesses, strengths. And when an enemy knows all our secrets, it's very difficult. Our nafs is an enemy that, unfortunately, we have lots of ties with. When an enemy has lots of ties with you, it's very difficult to fight. So this Arif mentioned one point. This is interesting. So nafs, which is the same as khud, can be sometimes worshipped. They call it nafs parasti or khud parasti, to worship yourself, to worship your khud. So he says, in order to understand this better and analyze this better, let us see what are different types and degrees of khudkhahi. Khudkhahi, you can say, wanting yourself, kind of egoism, but we have to explain it. So please don't think it is egoism in the general sense. So different types of wanting yourself. One is that you only think about yourself. From the time you wake up till you go to bed, you do everything for yourself, and you think about yourself, and you want to plan for yourself. Here, we are like animals and birds. A bird, when is awake, picks up some seeds, food for himself or herself, makes nests, plans, whatever, if they have such a thing as planning, whatever they do by instinct is for themselves. They are not thinking about needy birds in another place, for example. They are thinking about themselves. At this level, we can say it's a level which is not ethical, but also it's not unethical. So it is not related to ethics. Sometimes something is immoral, sometimes is immoral. Immoral means not related to morality. Immoral means against morality. Animals are not doing things morally and spiritually, or against morality and spirituality. Sometimes we operate at this level. Sometimes you see, no, people can be even worse than this. And that is, they just act at the service of their animal desires, their lower desires, and they want to bring everyone's interests and rights to themselves. A bird would not want too much, want something just enough. Maybe some animals or insects save for something also, but greediness of human beings has no limit. If you give the whole city, they want other cities. If you give the whole province, they want other country. If you give the country, they want the continent. If you give the continent, they want the whole world. Imam Khomeini rahmatullah used to say, if you tell that they can rule other planets, they want to rule other planets as well. There's no limit here. They want everything for themselves. So this is another level of khudkhahi. In Islam, we talk about shuh. Shuh means like miserliness. Some people have shuh muta', as we have in hadith. Means they obey their miserliness. They obey, for example, their greediness. Day and night, they work in order to satisfy this. Sometimes also even gets worse. Sometimes human beings develop very complicated and sophisticated spiritual illnesses. Sometimes they develop complexes. Some mental illnesses are not, because the person was bad. No, some of them actually are very good. But we are talking about some mental or spiritual disease that is because of unethical life. We are talking about this one. Unethical upbringing. For example, Ayatollah Mutahari says some people suffer severe jealousy. And they are not that much concerned about their own happiness. They are more concerned about another person that they have problem with and they have jealousy towards, not to be happy. They wish 10 times more than being happy that the other person suffers. He says you don't find this in any animal. That they are concerned about someone else not being happy. Sometimes there is a big arrogance in some people. He says sometimes there are issues which are very hidden and you think they don't exist, but in the time of the test and difficulties and troubles, they may appear. Before we reach that, he introduces some Quranic concept. For example, one concept that we have in the Quran is taswil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yusuf, verse 83, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ. He says this is very important psychological notion that Quran refers to. That sometimes we are deceived by ourselves. When our nafs wants something, tries to decorate it so nicely, wraps it so nicely, and present to us so nicely and free from problems, like a person who wants to sell you a car which is broken down. They can so nicely clean it and talk about this to deceive you. Our nafs can do the same with us and deceive us. He says psychologists today have reached some of these points, that how our nafs can deceive us, or how, for example, even sometimes a person can become mad without having any medical issue. Sometimes it has only internal causes. Sometimes when there is too much of suffering and calamities, our mind and some aspects of our soul, they say, without telling us, without maybe getting our consent, they say, let us deny everything to get rid of these sufferings. He says, a poet said, ز هوشیاران عالم هر که را دیدم غمی دارد، دلا دیوانه شو دیوانگی هم عالمی دارد. He says, all the people who are conscious in the world, they suffer. You remember in the beginning we said, how much pain, of course, from an Islamic perspective, is important. Pain for humanity, pain for problems that we see. But he says, all the conscious people have pain. My nafs, my heart, become mad. This has its own world. Because if you are intelligent and conscious, you have to suffer. So let's, not have any understanding. So this is something that, whether we like it or not, sometimes happens. And people, switch off their, understanding, and they just become mad. So one of the things that our nafs can do, one of the tricks, is to deceive us by decorating her choice. He says in the school of mysticism, sometimes you see 600, 700, even 1,000 years. They have understood so well some of the deep psychological issues of human beings. And he says they were very clever, they were very intelligent, so they took some clues from the Quran, like the idea of taswil, and then they were excellent in developing these ideas that now we understand some of them through psychology. He talks about hidden psychological complexes that human beings can develop. He refers to the story of dragon that llWe mentions, that how your nafs can be like a dragon, which is just because of freezing cold is not moving. And that person who saw it and thought it's dead took it home and put it under kursi, which is like a like a heater, but it's mostly they have a kind of desk, and they put some blanket, and then they put their feet under it. So he put it there, and this became a kind of good temperature for this dragon to again become active and started attacking. So he says, nafsat اژدهاست او کی مرده است از غم بی‌آلتی افسرده است. Your soul is a dragon. As a student, as a young person, as a teenager, as an unknown scholar, maybe you don't feel you have hubbul dunya, hubbul jah, all these problems. You feel, no, you don't have any of these things, but don't rush in your judgment. Now, because there are no means for you to be arrogant or greedy, later these things may emerge unless you have solved them and treated them. Another place he compares our desires in nafs with dogs. Sometimes dogs, especially wild dogs, they may live together in desert 10, 20, and when they are sleeping and they put their heads on their hands, you think they are very quiet, sleeping like, for example, lambs. And you think maybe some of them are actually lambs, or all of them are lambs, not dogs. But if a dead donkey is put there, you see these dogs become active and they want to attack and kill, not kill, to take away what is already dead. And he says, murdar, a dead and donkey animal, because it has no value, but our nafs can go after this. So he says, میلها همچون سگان خفته‌اند اندر ایشان خیر و شر بنهفته‌اند. Desires are like dogs which are sleeping. Among them, good and bad are not known. Maybe there are some sheep, some goats, some lambs, some dogs, maybe some good dogs, bad dogs. All when they are sleeping, all are silent. چون که قدرت نیست خفتند آن رده همچو هیزم پاره ها و تنده. Because they don't have power, they are sleeping like some log, some wood. تا که مرداری درآید در میان نفخ صور حرص کوبد بر سگان. چون که در کوچه خری مردار شد سگ خفته بدان بیدار شد. As soon as a dead animal appears, or for example, a donkey dies, you see 100 dogs become awake. And then he uses this for this point. حرص ها رفته اندر کتم غیب تاختن آورد و سر برزد ز جیب. مو به موی هر سگی دندان شده از برای حیله دم جنبان شده. And then he reaches this point. صد چنین سگ اندر این تن خفته اند چون شکاری نیستشان بنخفته اند. He says our desires are like these dogs. 100 dogs are inside us sleeping, but because they don't have any prey, anything to attack, they are silent. When something comes up, they are triggered. So you should not think that you are a very nice person because right now that you are unknown, no one listens to you, or you don't have power, you don't have money, you don't have influence, you are a humble person. The same person, if he's put into power, what he's going to do, what she's going to do. This unknown worker, if later becomes a millionaire, businessman or woman, what is going to do? If he becomes a politician, what's going to do? Then he starts his discussion of jihadun nafs according to the Quran and Hadith. So our discussion continues. I think for today this is enough. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to awaken us and to help us understand all the tricks that our nafs can make against us and others, and to be able to change and transform our nafs, inshallah, into nafs mutmainna. Ameen ya Rabbal Alamin. Are there questions?
Yes, Awa, there are some questions.
Bismillah.
Miss Rubab Sayyida, please unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I'm speaking from Dubai. My name is Rubab, and I'd like to know, we have learned about three realities like the soul, the body, and the nafs, right? So first of all, I'd like to know the difference. I know the body is different, but what about the nafs and the soul? Are there two different realities, or are they the same? And the second question is, when we say about these evil qualities like hasad and jealousy and all that, or the desire for power, etc., are they in the nafs or are they in the soul? Does the soul acquire them, or is it like just the nafs? That's my question. Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you very much, Asanta. Soul is translated as nafs, but we have different types of soul. So according to philosophers, we have vegetative soul, which exists in the plants, but we have it as well. We have animal soul, which exists in animals, and we have it. And we have a nafsun natiqa, which is only in human beings, the rational soul. Our soul has all these three, not as three separate nafs, as like three levels. Like we are a 3-floor building, you know, our nafs. And then nafs has different faculties. We have, you know, al-quwwatu al-shahawiyya, al-quwwatu al-ghadabiyya, al-quwwatu al-aqila. So one faculty is responsible for, you know, understanding and rationality. One is for appetite, one is for anger. And then each of them has vices and virtues, and the balanced position in each is what we have to achieve. The balanced position for quwwatul aqila is hikmah, wisdom. The balanced position for quwwatul shahawiyya is iffa. The balanced position for quwwatul ghadabiyya is bravery or shaja'a. And if you manage to have all these three, then you have justice or adala. So all are about nafs. And human spirit is the same as nafs and natiqa. So you can say ruh, you can say nafs. Here it doesn't make difference. Just you have to be careful that nafs can be used also for animals, for also plants. But when we talk about human nafs, is the same as, you know, spirit or ruh. And soul, you can say, it's not an issue.
Brother Jawad Naqvi.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thanks for, I mean, it's so many things that needs to be remembered from today.
Inshallah.
Yeah, see, inshallah. One thing which you discussed at the beginning is about when you are talking about Mulasad. It's about the soul and the body.
Yes.
I have a question about, I mean, it's like, especially we have a concept of Madhe Jismani and Madhe Ruhani.
Yes.
So should we believe in the when it is happening on the day of judgment, we will be only, it is only Ruhani, or it's related to Ruh only, or it is related to body as well?
So according to Quran, Ma'ad is Jismani. Jismani, not that it is not Rohani. When we say Jismani, means Rohani and Jismani, because about the spirit there is no disagreement. Some may say only a spirit is resurrected. Some say a spirit and body. We believe in both. And this is what we mean by Ma'ad Jismani. We say, we live in corporeal resurrection, because there are many, many references in the Quran and Hadith about things in hell and heaven that can only be understood if we have body too. If we have just, soul, many of these things would not be able to understood about, descriptions of heaven or hell. And if you want to take all of them in a metaphorical sense, it needs reason. You should not take so many verses of the Quran in a metaphorical sense, as long as there is a way to keep them as they are in their true sense or real sense, and ma'na al-waqi.
So in that sense, should we give equal importance to the body and the soul, or the more importance needs to go to the body, to the soul?
Of course. Yeah, our identity is made by our soul. Our iman and kufr relate to soul. Our virtues and vices relate to the soul. But body is also there. So it's not that body is equally important, but body is also with us in the heaven or hell, na'udzubillah. So it's a reality. It's something that would give lots of opportunities for pleasure, for example, for the people who are in heaven. So they not only have, direct spiritual pleasure, but for example, they have pleasure of eating, pleasure of drinking. But the main part of us, which makes our character, our identity, is the soul. Therefore, body can be replaced.
And is that possible, that a person who having like a one of these things, like either body or either the soul, like one is like having more related to hell and the other related to heaven, like a neck and bud. So like a body can be doing the more bad things, the soul is more, or it drives from the soul, and it is like on one side.
Body is not responsible. But the soul is responsible. Body does whatever it does according to the commands of the soul. So if body, for example, someone with his hand does something bad, or with his eyes, does something bad, it's the soul which is responsible, not the body.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. May Allah bless you, inshallah.
Next is Sister Sayyida Kazmi.
Assalamu alaikum, Aga.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, sister.
Okay, Aga, my question is, I might not be having enough knowledge of the whole, because just a normal human being. But my question is, like, if somebody is talking about the grudge, sometimes we are left with grudge in our hearts regarding people, which is like, of course, if we dig deep down, we do see that there is some negativity or some situation which arised because of which they did harm to us in past. And if they are a consistent part of our lives, they will stay in our lives, and they are doing, if same person is doing again and again harm in our life, which we are able to see and we are able to witness, but we are not able to remove them from our life. So because of this, an automatic feeling of grudge, even if we try to forgive them, no matter how much, still they come up back with more harm. And resulting this, grudge stays in us. Now, in this situation, what measures should one take in that regard? Like literally don't desire bad for them, but we think in our heart that okay, there is a day of judgment, but in this world even they should be understanding that the pain they are giving to that the third person, they should understand it by themselves getting it at least. So these kind of feelings do arise when too much negativity comes from one person and you are not able to remove them. So, what kind of teachings does Islam come in this regard when somebody is consistently being given harm and the other person is like, so isn't the grudge automatic then? Like, how much forgiving we should be? Of course, we've got the teachings of Ahl Bayt in front of us, but shouldn't there be another way, better way to just compensate with this regard? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are two aspects. One is to see if there is any ethical, wise way to change this situation. If something is continuing, we need to find a wise ethical way to address this. Maybe we need to talk to that person. Maybe we need to, I don't know, discuss things. Maybe, there are different measures. Maybe sometimes we need to involve other people, to help, seek advice, etc. This is one aspect. How to deal with something which is ongoing. Should I just ignore it? Should I, make some measure? So this one side. And I don't have one answer for all cases. Say, let it continue, let it carry, just ignore it. No, it depends on the situation and severity of it. But the other side is how much I should allow this affect me. In the first part, we can have different scenarios and we need to make different decisions. But in the second part, there is one suggestion. Do not let this affect you. No matter whether this is just or unjust, whether it is going or ongoing, or stopped, just don't let it affect you as much as possible. Don't turn this drain you. Don't let this turn you into an angry person, an unethical person, someone who wants just to react and do everything possible to harm that person or people who are related to that person. Or for example, if you are studying, damage your study. If you are living, you have family, children, this all the time, affects you, makes you sad, makes you depressed. No, protect yourself. So sometimes I say it's like, for example, someone has put a knife in my hand. Okay, this is very bad. But I can keep this knife in my hand forever and show it around. And, even, for example, say, look, if it had gone a little bit further, it would have, cut my nerve, for example. Look, this is bleeding, look, this, that. And another thing is that remove it, try to heal it. Try to heal it. So you need sometimes to look for your own healing. And one of the best ways of healing when someone has done bad to us, after you take care of the first part, or in addition to that, is to pray for them. Pray for their guidance, pray for their understanding, pray for their prosperity, pray that, oh Allah, this person is harming me or has harmed me, but please make them good people. Please don't punish them because of what they have done to me so that they become worse. Instead of punishing them, make them better people. I am happy to forgive them. So please, you make them good people. If you manage to pray for them, automatically it puts you in a higher position that no longer that person is a threat for you, because you are in a position that you are above that person, and you can, care for that person and pray for that person. And prayer of such a person also, dua of mazlum is very much answered, especially if a mazlum asks for the guidance of zalim. This dua is very powerful. So inshallah things can improve. But if I curse them, if I pray against them, I am going to suffer, and they are also going to become maybe worse if my prayer is answered by Allah, if my curse is answered by Allah. So you need to immunize yourself. You need to have your own healing. You need to let this pass, in the sense that don't remain busy with this. You have more important things to do. You have lots of other things to take care of. And just pray for that person. Inshallah, things will improve. In the course of our lives, we may come across many people, and many times because of misunderstanding or because of their vicious intention, whatever, they may harm us. But if we want to get busy with all these people, then we cannot progress. You are climbing the mountain. Some other people may want you to fight with them, to stop you climbing. You just climb, pray for them, try to not get, stopped by them, stuck by them. Carry on.
Yeah, next we have Sister Arifa Suleiman.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, sister. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you, Sheikh?
Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. Are you in Tanzania?
I'm in Tanzania, yes.
MashaAllah.
So my question was, when you explained about self-purification, then self-position, the question which arises in my mind is self-position self-awareness? So what comes first? According to what you explained, is self-purification and then self-positioning. So is self-positioning having self-awareness first and then you embark on self-purification?
So first is awakeness. The very first thing is we have to wake up. After awakeness is self-knowledge, ma'rifatun nafs. When you have ma'rifatun nafs, then you have to have self-control. And then you have self-purification. And self-purification is a long process. You cannot have self-purification unless you first stop listening to your nafs and then you try to tame it. So self-control is before self-purification, or you can say it's the earliest stage of self-purification, but we need ma'rifatun nafs so that we know the threats which are there, with potential which are there. And before that is awakeness, yaqzeh. So the first step is yaqzeh, it's awakeness. And now sunniyamun, Rasulullah said, people are asleep. Hatta idha matun tabahu. When they die, they wake up. It's too late. We have to wake up while we still have time. So the very first position, stage is yaqzeh, means awakeness.
Thank you. It answers my question. The 4 steps are quite useful. Thank you, Sheikh.
May Allah bless you, inshallah. Tamasudwa.
Inshallah. Tamasudwa.
Khuda hafiz.
God bless.
Khuda hafiz.
Dr. Aleen Rizvi.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, sister. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. I hope you're well too.
Thank you.
I'll try to make my questions as brief as possible. The first one, it's got multiple parts, but I will try to keep it very brief. It's regarding soul and mind. Now, as a medical doctor, this is the most grey area that I've ever encountered. For example, in the case of brain death, a lot of scholars have said that when the soul leaves the body, that's when the person's dead. But how do you determine that? Also, soul and mind, what is the difference? Is the mind part of the soul? Is it like a segment of the soul? Is it a reflection of the soul, or is it vice versa? And what leaves the body first? When does the person actually die? When should the doctors declare a person dead? Because according to the scholars, it is when the soul leaves the body. How do we determine that? I do have another question, but that might be slightly unsavory for this gathering. So if there's another platform or an email address where I can write to you about that one, I'd be very grateful. I have a second question too. Would you like to answer this one first, or should I ask the other question too?
Yeah, let me first. Very good question, and this is actually something that we have discussed in details with some. We had some sessions with Imamia medics, and also we had 2 presentations in Stanmore and in Portsmouth with some doctors about, you know, what is the definition of death, and, you know, things that, you know, we have to know about brain death, etc. So I hope you can find those lectures. If not, I can share the link I have to find. So basically, death is, according to Muslim, you know, philosophers, is separation, or I can say considerable separation, because even to some extent the soul still remains connected with the body, but considerable separation of the soul from body. Sometimes we say departure, but this is for the sake of, you know, just communication. It's not that the soul is inside the body. But we cannot define the exact moment that this happens unless we have a vision. If we have, you know, a kind of you know, vision of the heart, so that we can see whether this person has entered barzakh or not. For us, it's not possible always. So what then we do in fiqh, because fiqh is a science for practicalities, and we have to have a, you know, sharp point. We cannot leave things, you know, unknown. So in fiqh, then we have a definition of death, but it's not that always these two match. Maybe someone is clinically, or, you know, physically, or from fiqh point of view alive, but from spiritual and philosophical point of view is dead. Maybe he's already in barzakh. We don't know. But because we have to settle these things, so in fiqh, then fuqaha have their own definition, not their own, I mean, based on their understanding of the hadith and Quran of death. And here also they try to be very precautious, very muhtat. Therefore, as long as there are some signs of life, they don't consider this person as a dead person, and they ask us to be very respectful to the last even traces of human life. Maybe this person is already dead from a spiritual perspective, but we cannot, you know, tell people, for example, this person is dead and then start the process of after death for inheritance, for marriage, etc. As long as there are signs of life here, and we have to be very careful not to let people become disrespectful about human life and say, okay, this person now is dead, so we can just finish things. So there are lots of considerations here, and therefore our fuqahas are very careful in declaring death, and they don't accept brain death as death, although maybe this person is not going to come back, or maybe even he has started his barzakhi life. But in fiqh, it's like law. We have to be very careful, and we need to have very sharp distinctions. If there is a gray area, we cannot allow for people to have their own subjective judgments. So we have to wait till it becomes 100% clear that this person is dead. This is a summary, but it needs more discussion, but I hope it helps.
Thank you so much. I've got another question regarding what you mentioned earlier about mystics arriving at conclusions after studying the Quran, the Hadith, and then you mentioned something else, their own observations. Were you referring to what Mullah Sadra refers to as direct witnessing or kashf?
Yeah.
Mukashafa.
Yeah. So what's the question?
Is that what you were referring to when you said that they sometimes derive their own conclusions based on their observations?
It can be that there are different types. Sometimes it's just a matter of inspiration. Sometimes ideas come to their mind. Sometimes it's a matter of mystical experiences more than inspiration. For example, they have mukashafa. Sometimes they have mu'ayana. If it is mukashafa, means that it has not taken form in the way that other people also could see. So maybe a person has mukashafa and sees someone, but other people who are around, they don't see anything. This is in the world of mukashafa. This doesn't mean that actually physically some person was there. But sometimes mu'ayana, and they can see something, physically. And there are different ways, but Mullah Sadra was great in bringing mystical experiences and Quranic, points and philosophical arguments all together, not by mixing them up, but in parallel. So it's not that, for example, he has an argument which is rationally weak, but then he says, I have mukashafa for this. No, his philosophy is purely philosophical, but at the same time, he can show the same result from Quranic discussion and also based on mystical, experiences.
Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. Thank you so much. I'd be very grateful if you could leave an email address or something that I could send an email to, because I've got another couple of questions.
You can message me on Facebook, inshallah.
I don't have Facebook.
Or on Insta.
Instagram, okay. Right, I'll get your Instagram from one of the admins. Thank you so much, Sheikh.
You're welcome. May Allah bless you, inshallah. Iltimas-ullah.
Awa, do you have time for entertaining one last question? There is one last raised hand.
Yeah, if the last question.
Yes, brother Javed Hassan.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Muhammad Ali Shomali. I am Javed Hassan Akhtar from Dera Ghazi Khan, Pakistan. Sir, as I understand from your thus, nafs mean inner self. inner self. Can you mention 2 to 3 major acts to satisfy the nafs to keep you on right path?
To satisfy nafs for what?
Yes, to keep on right, to keep you on right path. Just 2 to 3 acts, major acts. Thank you.
To keep you on the right path?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with respect to nafs, nafs is like a wild horse. And we need to tame it. You need to give the horse what it needs, but also not leave it free so that it takes you everywhere, or may, attack. So with moderation, with rifq, with moderation, you have to control and tame your nafs. So Islam says there is halal. You can have halal, satisfaction when it comes to your needs, food, drink, shelter, etc. But don't go to excess. Don't let this be the only reason for your life and just day and night thinking about these things. And try to engage your nafs before your nafs engages you. So try to make yourself busy with good things, because when you are idle, then nafs makes you busy and brings its own desires and wishes. And you should never be relaxed about your nafs and judgments of your nafs and desires of your nafs. You must always know that there is great potential that I may be wrong. My desires may be not, what Allah wants from me. Unfortunately, sometimes people, just they do what they want and they think they are right. They don't need to change, and other people have to change. But we always need to change, to improve, to understand our faults, because we want to be as close to Allah as possible. And certainly, no one can say, I am already there. If anyone says that I am already there, I have no problems to take care of, this means that you are totally outside the current. So always be critical of yourself. Al-mu'minu dhaninun binafsih. We have to be suspicious about our own nafs, but not to lose your confidence, not to lose your hope, but never dismiss chances of your nafs deceiving you. So you have to be very critical, very alert about your own nafs, but also don't depress your nafs too much, because then it may rebel. So be moderate, but in control.
Jazakallah. To kindly conclude and make dua.
In this day of Jumu'ah, we end with dua faraj. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma kulli waliyyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala aba'ih fi hadhihi as-sa'ah wa fi kulli sa'ah. Waliyan wa hafidan wa qa'idan wa nasira wa dalilan wa 'ayna hatta tuskinahu ardaka taw'a wa tumatta'ahu fiha tawila. وامن علينا برضاه وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاءه وخيره. O Allah, please send your rahmah and maghfirah to all mu'mineen and mu'minat, especially those who have rights upon us. Please bless our parents who are alive with health and dignity and joy, and those who have passed away, please be very kind and forgiving and generous with them. And please give shafa to all people who are ill, all who suffer, all who have asked for dua, and grant hajat of mu'mineen and mu'minat. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Iltimasa dua from.
Thanks, Aga. Thanks.
Thank you. Jazakumullah. Fi amallah.